Hello, everyone. Hello, my name is Sasha Riess, and here today to share some really unfortunately sad, but very kind of like breakthrough story that happened last month in my home country, Belgrade, Serbia. One of my friends, I can say so, partner, like colleagues, that for sure, went through a crazy, social media backlash, or how can I say, lynch, kako se kaže lynch, right? And it's because the dog, under his care, a puppy, a little poodle that he was taking care of, died the next day of the lungs that overloaded with the blood. They came to be that lungs edema that was actually causing the little dog not be able to breathe and suffocating actually in its own blood. So the owner was and still is some influence local in Serbia, and she took it and broadcasted this this event of her losing her puppy to this event nationwide, and the media took it on, and it became a sensation, unfortunate sensation of the country. It too, I can just understand like what my friend or actually colleague was going through, and later on he released a statement about actually what happened, and he said the puppy didn't like to be groomed, and he just used a standard industry procedure, just putting a puppy on the side and then performing shaving the feet or the stomach or whatever he was doing there. Unfortunately, amount of the force used to perform that performance was not of the question, but what the problem was, it's still under review, but most importantly the problem of that was that little two sentences. One, what happened, and that the dog didn't like to be groomed. The dog was just resisting being groomed, and that he performed a standard industry procedure in order to make the dog calm. And I must agree that is a standard industry procedure. Even if the veterinarian, when they want to perform something, they would put the dog on the side and then do whatever procedure they need to do until they do not decide that actually the level of the stress is so high that they cannot maintain the safety of the dog under this, and then they need to, tranquilize the dog in order to make the procedure. And then I was starting thinking, because I don't know how much you know about my interest in this scientific field of understanding what's going on inside a dog's body, and I find it a Pure Love and Harmony Institute, the research place that actually dives deep into understanding the human-dog interaction, the dog behavior, the modern dog understanding of how the modern dog actually interpret the environment that we are putting them in, and we are trying to make something out of it by understanding how to manage and mitigate this world that we created, and now we bring the dogs in, and what this has to do with the grooming. An amazingly big amount of the dogs that we see lately entering the grooming shops, even here in the school, are the anxiety of the dogs that they're going through, and the way how they're experiencing the grooming is not the same like it was like even 10 years ago. The level of the anxiety, the dogs are not same. The dogs seem to be like much more fragile and not able to adjust to all of this that actually is happening inside the grooming as a standard routine procedure for us to take the dog from now they enter the grooming shop until they do not go out. And the questions I raised with this live, I just want to keep the things rolling up, and I want to start talking about a lot of things that I discovered during these 35 years of working with dogs I just never happened to share them because I was thinking the people are neither interesting in such a big science, I can say, neither understanding the data, what that has to do with the grooming at all. Because in the grooming and the dog world, we are just trained that this is the way it is, and this is the way we do it, and this is just the dog gonna occasionally get used to it. Unfortunately, the reports worldwide about injuries, and not injuries because we didn't do something to a dog, and no injuries are happened because we want to do something. Everything happens occasionally and under the circumstances in which then we, find a lawyer or insurance to take care of. But the question becomes like, how do we deal with that emotionally? And how do we deal with that when the responsibility is on us, regardless how it's going to play out in a courtroom or in a relationship of that particular pet owner? Because sometimes some people just shut off and they don't want nothing to have to do with you. The others want to participate in finding the best way, to understand like what happened. The third ones would just go bazooka and go all over you. During my lifetime as a professional groomer, I had a lot of crises like that. Like one dog died on my table under the standard industry practice, and it was I was in a school, so it's kind of like that takes a little bit of my responsibility off my shoulder because it happened on the watch of my instructors. But it was like, labeling my relationship to a dog grooming forever. And it was like, I was 16 years old. Many of you that follows me already know the story, but it's always like, always the reason why I'm doing all of this the way I'm doing it is because of that one dog. So that was a dog that was put on a table after bath. So we bathed him, we put him on a table. It was a glorious big Newfoundland that was actually like a huge champion, and we were preparing that dog for the major local international show in Budapest, Hungary. So we put the dog on a table. It was a big table enough for the dog that we usually do, like, okay, put the dog on this table, big dog, big table, okay. So we put the dog on a table, and he was just enough, just okay. And there is a safety loop on the dog, and the dog simply slipped, and it was too heavy. So entire body weight of the dog just slipped off the table, and the dog remained hanging on that safety loop with a cracked neck. I heard that crack, and every single time I recall the story, I can always refresh everything that happened that day very vividly, because that's gonna later. I never had a safety loop on a table, never ever, neither now. The first thing when we starting collaborating with the Texas Soulbreed Grooming School, and when we came here to bring the Pure Love and Harmony curriculum to be taught here, the first thing we did is took all the safety loops off the tables, because gives us a lot of time that we can just back here in a back little mind. Oh, the dog is on a safety loop, they won't go anywhere. Even if I turn around, even if I move left, move right, like the dog is safe on the table because they have safety loop. I saw with my eyes what that can do. And also there was a reported, not so far away, there was a reported story from Singapore. I think a little corgi was hanging itself off because the groomer went to a toilet or just moved away from the table. And the dog was just, interesting, and some dogs were around. He just wanted to be there and hang himself and die of the same thing. What happened to that? Cracked his neck. So all of these and then why now I need to teach people to be very present when the dog is on a table. So there is no way that they would think about doing anything else than have both hands on the dog, or if they move left or right, to have the dog under the arm, or if they need to move away, to put the dog, to ask someone to take care of the dog. But there is no safety loop on the tables when I teach my students, because, and that is there is one thing that I learned then, and what I made a silent vow to was, I will never ever use a safety loop. But then I needed to learn a lot other things rather than just, how do I maintain the dog be quiet while being groomed? How do I teach the dog to that was actually what I wanted to bring. How do I teach the dog to enjoy being groomed? So they can kind of like relax while in on the grooming process. And I must tell you, like majority of the dogs that we do here in the school and the students as well, are most likely to lay on a bed while lay on a table while being dried, or very much nicely cooperate with the groomer or with the students, with us, with anyone working on them, because they love being groomed. If the dog do not love being groomed, we don't work with them. No matter what, there is no way that we would put a dog on a table that resists grooming. It's easy to overload the grooming. It's easy to work on a dog that's, you just put a little, you put a little muzzle around, you put a safety loop, you put a lot of other tools and gadgets that are created within the industry, so we can put the dog and maintain its calmness. But then unfortunately we learned, not unfortunately, unfortunately for this industry, it turned to be like, we created industry 1800, and then nothing changed to these days. Nothing changed. But what changed are the dogs we are working on. Those are not anymore the dogs that can handle all of that stress related, because the stress in the grooming, like we are working around two very primordial fears of the dogs. Fear of falling down, so we are putting them on a table, and immediately when the dog feels height, immediately they are stepping into their flight and fight mode, thinking of not falling. That's, awakening the fear on its own, just awakening this fear of dogs that will help us control the dog. And then the second one is the second primordial fear to all the mammals, including humans. It's not a fear of dying. There are two fears that we are born with. One is a fear of falling down, and the second fear is a fear of sudden loud noises. So both of those fears are very something that we work around with the dogs. And we, every single time that you turn on the clipper that's loud, that turn on the hair dryer, that turn on the blow dryer, and everything that we turn on the dogs, we awaken this. But it's not only that we are awakening the dog's primordial fears. What we are doing is actually, it's not because they are afraid. They are afraid as a reaction to the outside stimulus. Now we are entering the story that actually very much intrigued me for all of these years, like studying that. And I also published a couple of scientific papers, peer-reviewed papers, one of them is published in one of the biggest nutrition journalists, and it's called Importance of the Minerals in the Canine Health. And later on, and now I'm about to publish my second one, but this is a breakthrough study in which I evaluated together with the team that I have surrounded myself on this Pure Love and Harmony Institute, how the mineral ratio of the dogs actually system that can be tracked affects their behavior, but also on contrast, how the behavior affects the mineral ratios inside the dog's body. So but in order for us to track that and to understand that, we need to dive into what's going on into dog's brain. Because as with the humans as well, what's going on and what's a big problem of the dog's behavior is not because they want, or they are spoiled, or they are aggressive, or they are born that way. No. They might carry a possibilities of behaving a certain way, but will they or won't they depend exclusively about the environment the dog is raised in. So that's where we are kind of telling about how the dogs are bred, or how the dogs are raised, or what's going on in the dog's body. It's not about the outcome of their behavior, is the structure of their physiology. Because the physiology is the first that conducted the dog's behavior. So the dog's resisting grooming or any other thing to be done to them is the same way we are resisting. It's because we entered a state of trauma, re-traumatization, or actually understanding how the trauma operates is also of the crucial importance for every single pet care professional, because that's what happens in this coexistence of the human and the dogs living at the same place. And that actually, the other thing led me to evaluate and actually to become a certified family constellation therapist for almost 10, 15 years now. And it's not because I loved going after that, or that was my intention, become a family constellation therapist and kind of like solving the problem to my clients. Why do they have a problem with their mother or father or siblings or whatever is going on in their life? No, but to reevaluate the question of why the people are living with dogs such relationships that they cannot develop with any other human being that they love. And out from all of those questions and all of those knowledge and all of those very broad education that I put myself on, all of these conclusions that I oftentimes share with the people sound like, oh my God, he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. But actually, exactly the scientific approach of how do we handle stress and what the stress actually means, it's all about, all became available to us once we understand what is the neuroscience, how the neurons operate, what is really how the homeostasis operates within the environment of human-dog relationship, what the homeostasis is, how the homeostasis actually tend to keep the dogs and our behavior within the certain parameters, and whatever we survive, we're gonna keep inviting in our life. And that's also, we try to call it like law of attraction, which is actually just a like a silent force influencing our life called homeostasis. The intention of the system always to get back to where it was. So you have a lot of winners that will win, the poor people, you know, with no money that will live $1 million overnight, become a millionaires, and then lose everything in no time. Because not because they didn't know what to do with the business, with the money, but because of inner force making us come back to the place where we feel the most secure. So now it would be like, oh my God, how someone can be poor and feel secure in that place? Well, we call it very, very suddenly explained forces of loyalty, in which we stay loyal to whatever gave us life to. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad, but most importantly, there is a way out. And as is there a way out for the people, there is a way out for the dogs as well. And our relationship with the dogs need to be evaluated and absorbed and absorb. Observed from different angles. And that's what the very important part is, that you never call the difficult dog a difficult dog because, oh, it's difficult because of the breeding. Oh, the breeder is responsible. Oh, the owner is responsible. Oh, it doesn't matter who is responsible. It's a difficult dog now. What are we going to do about it? How are you going to handle the difficult dog without killing them in the process? Because also it's not only killing them at that time or doing them something that they will not be able to kind of like to go through, like this little puppy that died, you know, because of the overload with the stress or whatever outcome of all of this that the research or the case would, you know, bring up why this happened. But the cumulative stress is also something that we work on and add on to a dog's well-being, overall well-being. Because if the dog doesn't like to be groomed, and you are having a dog be groomed every month we are contributing to the cumulative stress that later on then we surprise ourselves, oh my God, all of the dogs, like, 60% of the dogs are going to develop some sort of the cancer. And then there is this magnificent newly described disease called Cushing disease, chronic stress, high cortisol, and entire body functions completely shut down. And the question becomes like how the grooming contributes to this overall well-being of the dogs. Just keeping them clean and neat and nice and everything. Like, am I doing something that adds up to all of this mess that the dogs live in the modern age? That's what we need to evaluate. And that's what I try to kind of in days to come to try to kind of share with you. There is a lot of scientific studies you can learn. There is a lot of cited very good papers from both areas of the world, like humans that can be brought to dogs, and then newly developed studies about the cortisol level in the dogs. Because once you understand the physiology then you know how to change the behavior. Because the behavior won't change until the physiology is not changed. So in order for the aggressive dog not to become aggressive is to change the way the brain reacts on the certain visual or hearing stimulus. Everything around the dog is triggering their response. The question becomes how the brain is programmed to respond to a certain thing. So we are not working with the dog's behavior. We are working, anyone, including trainers, working with the dog's physiology that need to change first in order for the behavior to be changed. And slowly in this time to come, I'm going to really share with you all of this that you can later on learn on your own pace or read those papers, but some of them are very well-known experiments, like a Pavlov experiment. He showed that sort of the conditioning cannot be used in a learning curve because the impact on the change to the brain is not high enough to maintain the association of the unconditional conditioning. Like how you say that, kako se kaže to, Vedrane, pomozi mi. Šta je pisao Pavlov eksperiment? Kako se on zvao? Classical conditioning, there you go, I just needed the classical condition. So I mean that I can bring in something in connection to something causing the same outcome because two stimulus would act close to each other. But he said once you remove the secondary stimulus, or actually remove the primary stimulus and leave only the secondary stimulus that actually piggybacked on the physiological response on the first stimulus, the physiological response is going to fade and occasionally disappear. And why is that? The conclusion of his experiment, no, you can use it. No, you can't use it. That's what he said. You cannot use it because imprint on the dog's brain, imprint on the physiology is not strong enough to do the lasting change of the behavior, because the behavior changes because brain changed, and as an outcome of the brain change, now behavior changed. So every single thing that we use in a training, all the gadgets, and now you have all of these pin collar, a collar that like a prong collars and e-collars and shock collars of this kind, of this level and that level, and now the people there is very famous thing like, oh, it's not producing a big shock, you can put it on yourself, try on a heart, it's not strong enough, but still changes dog's behavior. And it's not changing dog's behavior because of the connection. The dog says, oh, if I do this, then I'm going to be hurt. And that's wherever the intention, like an intensivity of that stressor need to be strong enough and last very short impacted time, so the dog clearly gets a message, if I do this, then that. Or that the impact is not as much as strong, but it has a other component that's very important, lasting, so longer lasting over a longer period of time. So longer period of time, and then what, but that's also very important to distinguish learning from enforcing. We call it positive reinforcement, where actually the positive reinforcement is still causing the trauma to a dog, but that trauma has low intensity, because what's the trauma in a positive reinforcement? It's withholding the reward when the behavior is not the way we want. It's not desirable or acceptable. So every single time when the dog does not do what we want them to do, we withhold the prize, meaning that the dog is still going under the stress that's not high-end stress, but it's a low-intensity stress. That stress, when lasts long enough, imprint on the physiology will be enough for that behavior to vanish or actually to be replaced with something else. But the outside force, and I'm going to show you in days to come like where to look for the answers of, and logically come up with a conclusion, because it's logical and it's common sense to understand it from that perspective, is that if you want to influence behavior from outside, you must cause a level of trauma. You must enforce the scar on the dog's brain or the human brain either. It works both ways. If the scar is wrong, big enough, you will be able to change the behavior, and then you're gonna get a desirable, acceptable behavior. But the question becomes like, for what cause? Because that sometime with the other experiments, like a little Albert or the Nazi experiments, they have many I'll share with you. So Nazis were doing tremendously cruel experiments on the people, but showed a lot about how the human brain operates, and all of those finding unfortunate finding, we can learn to understand like on what level the damage of the physiology can be done to humans or to anyone that has a brain, including dogs, in order to change their behavior, because the outcome of the behavior changes if the trauma is so high that the people, or actually the brain, cannot predict what's reality and what's not, and then tries to find a way within that time frame, within that frame, in order to create a world inside to escape the outside reality. That's how the people survived the Holocaust, by actually creating a dream inside their own mind. And they said like they could take my life, they could take my body, they could take me everything, but they couldn't make me think what they wanted. I was able to. So the strong ones that overcome that with that attitude, that mindset, were able to survive and later on live the long lives, like hundreds and plus years, trying to tell all of that story. But all of those stories are precious in order for us to understand how the human mind and how the dog's physiology actually works. And if we disregard that just because, oh no, it's a fashion that no one's actually believe in, and no, I'm doing this for 40 years and this is how it is, and I'm doing it for 50 years and this is how it is. And you know what the problem is? That's the problem there. Because you're doing it for 40 years, you're doing exactly what the parents did to us, and that's what I wrote the paper on. That is, how do we justify trauma as a way of using it on others that cannot resist it, including children and dogs. The people that are enforcing trauma and justify it like it's okay are the ones that were emotionally or physically abused as children. And later on, justifying those results of their parents because that's the way, look at me, how I grew up, and I'm strong and I'm happy and everything is great with me. It must be because they raised me that way. So it must be that they did good, and it must. But actually, when you start looking deeper, then you find a lot of loyalty to the same cycle of abuse, just expressed on the different levels to others that cannot resist. All of this is very important topics when it comes to a human-dog relationship and any dog-related business that we all need to learn. And that's something that I find is like, it was a common knowledge, but now I see that actually by holding this story silent, I maybe actually contributed to the overall picture of this and everything of that maybe needed to change long time ago, because the dogs today cannot handle the industry that builds around the dogs that no longer exist or can handle. We can now play the blame game. Who is responsible for that? Breeders or owners or this or trainers or industry itself. But we need to face the reality. And we need to understand, if we keep doing to the dogs what we did 50 years ago to them, modern dogs are gonna just break under that pressure. Doesn't need to kill them instantly, but it will contribute to their overall stress accumulation, causing their slow and painful death out from diseases unknown to a dog kind for so many years. So if we did it 50 years ago, we were able to do it 50 years ago because 50 years ago the dog were able to live with that and cope with that completely different than the dogs of today. So stay with me on this journey, and as we go through the days, I'll try to update you with very interesting topics and very interesting, how can I say, sources that you can do your own research and bring modern world to a common sense and try to change better for the dogs, because we know better, we can do better. And once we do better to the dogs, we might change in a process, creating a better world in a process. Abuse is not the way to go. Abuse shouldn't be justified, and abuse shouldn't be an excuse for us doing to our dogs things that were done to us. And just because we survived, it's not something that we should enforce on the people that cannot, or the creatures like a dogs that cannot resist. So thank you for your time today, and then see you tomorrow with some interesting topics about, out from all of these that I was talking about a little bit tonight. I just wanted to share my big journey on how did I ended up creating a pure love and harmony as a concept of the human-dog relationship, in which the mutual respect means that I learn about the dogs enough so I know what the dog needs, from not from my perspective of what I would love them to have, but what are their real needs as a species, or what do they really need as a different beings, that we share this beautiful world today with. So thank you so much for your time. My name is Sasha Riess, and this was a little intro about what is to come more on this an amazing topic about dogs' physiology and its impact to a behavior that we actually cope with without really understanding how it appears firsthand. So thank you so much, and see you